Dragon Shield? That's right, the best brand for Magic related accessories is now sponsoring the channel. If you plan to upgrade your collection with unbreakable sleeves, sturdy deck boxes or other accessories, feel free to use our affiliate link below as any purchase will help the show. Now this week we have Elderbag from his Medieval Fair adventures. He brought a Volo Food Chain deck. What else? Val put together a spicy Squee combo deck. David is piloting Tainted's Doom Farm, a list with Tymna and Malcolm, and Rodrigo is trying Lubuzz's Exit Over Here list for Extus Auric Overlord. Val is going first and he kept his first 7 with 2 mountains and Simian Spirit Guide for explosiveness. Birgi and Jarius Familiar already at hand means Goblin Matron can find Scarce Prospector and then he only needs to find an outlet for infinite Squee casts, Pyroblast for some interaction. David had to mulligan down to 6, finding a single exotic orchard but with Mox Opal and Felwar Stone for possible ramp. Gitax and Probe can serve as an early cantrip while he has Flusterstorm for interaction and Demonic Tutor to pivot his game plan. He sent Mox Diamond to the bottom. Rodrigo also mulliganed down to 6, keeping a Blood Crypt, Mana Confluence and Mars Flats for lands. Demonic Tutor can pivot his game plan into the Twin Flame combo or more grindy with Jeska's Will at hand. He bottomed a Silence. Finally, Elder kept his first 7 with an Emergence Zone and Command Tower for lands. That Mana Crit will allow for a turn 1 Rhystic Study, or a simple Remora to draw into some juice, since everything else is interaction, Mental Misstep and Flusterstorm. Ready for the match? Val starts the game with a Humble Mountain, passing the turn. David, as conservative as he is, plays a tapped Hallowed Fountain and casts a Mox Opal, passing the turn. Rodrigo plays a Marsh Flats and passes. Elder plays a Command Tower and casts a Mana Crypt, followed by that turn 1 Rhystic. Val promptly responds with a Pyroblast, but Elder was ready with his Mental Misstep. I guess those 2 life were really precious, right David? Val plays another mountain, and his explosive start is now delayed by that Rhystic, and he passes. David plays an exotic orchard and casts a Felwar Stone, triggering Rhystic and unable to pay, ending his turn. In the end step still, Rodrigo cracks his fetch for a tapped Sacred Foundry and gets to his turn. He plays an untapped Blood Crypt and then casts a Demonic Tutor, triggering Rhystic and he can't pay. He searches for a Mana Crypt and casts it as well, triggering Rhystic and unable to pay. It seems only Val decided to play reasonably. Elder untaps and wins his Crypt roll. He plays a Flutterstrand and cracks it for a Tropical Island. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding his Exotic Orchard, and casts his Mystic Remora for even more draw potential. He still casts a Simic Signet and passes. Val draws, plays a mountain and casts his Birgi, triggering Rhystic and not paying, ending his turn. David plays a Windswept Teeth and cracks it for his Scrubland. He casts his Commander Malcolm, triggering Rhystic and paying for it, and then passes a turn. Rodrigo untaps and wins his Crypt roll as well. He plays a Vault of Champions and casts his Commander Extus Auric Overlord, triggering Rhystic and paying for it. Elder untaps and takes 3 from the Crypt. He pays for the Remora to stay, plays an Emergence Zone and casts an Arbor Elf, also ending his turn. Val plays another mountain and casts his Jarius Familiar, triggering Birgi and Rhystic and unable to pay for it. He gains red mana and attacks David with Birgi before passing. David gets to his turn, casts Tymna right away, preemptively paying for the Rhystic trigger. He goes into combat, attacking Rodrigo with Malcolm and creating a treasure. Tymna then triggers and he pays 1 life to draw a card. His Mox Opal is now online and he passes. Rodrigo untaps and wins his Crypt roll. He plays an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth and then casts Grim Hireling, triggering and paying for the Rhystic trigger. He attacks David back, and due to Extus Double Strike, he triggers Grim Hireling twice for 4 treasures. He ponders on activating Grim Hireling but decides to pass. Elder untaps and also wins his Crypt roll. He still pays for the Mystic Remora. He draws, plays a Gemstone Caverns and casts his Commander Volo Guide to Monsters. He then casts a Mox Opal and passes. Val is flooding a bit, this time a Gemstone Caverns. He ponders for a moment and then casts Purphoros God of the Forge, which is the outlet he needed. Birgi and Rhystic triggers and he pays for it. With the red mana, he casts his Commander Squee, hoping to do as much as he can before the game reaches an end. Birgi triggers before Rhystic, so he can't pay. It resolves and Purphoros triggers, dealing 2 damage to each opponent. He still attacks Rodrigo for 2 in the air as he is on Nos and passes. David draws and goes into combat right away, sending Malcolm headed to Rodrigo. He creates a treasure, then pays 1 life to draw a card from his Tymna. He then plays a Misty Rainforest and passes. Rodrigo untaps and once again takes no damage from the Crypt. He probes players' hand sizes and fires a Jeska's Will targeting David, who has 7 in hand. Remora and Rhystic triggers and he pays only for the Rhystic. Jeska's Will resolves and he finds quite some nice cards. He casts his Dragon Rage Channeler, triggering Rhystic and not paying as that will is imminent, casting it right away. Darcy, Rhystic and Remora all trigger, and he doesn't pay for any. He then surveils an LED to the graveyard and Elder deeply ponders on the wheel, as he drew some juice. He casts a Mystical Tutor, and in response, David cracks his Misty Rainforest for an Underground Sea. David then fires a Dispel on it, triggering Remora and Rhystic, but not paying for either, as he has something up his sleeve. In response to the Remora trigger though, Elder fires a Worldly Tutor, but in response to it, David fires a Flusterstorm, and storm count is 7, which David divides as 4 copies to Worldly and 2 copies on the original to Mystical Tutor. Rhystic and Remora trigger, and once again he doesn't pay. However, Elder still has his Flusterstorm from the start of the game and casts it for some more storm. He ponders on which tutor he would rather save and points all 8 flusters to the 4 flusters David has pointed at his Worldly Tutor. However, David doesn't pay 2 for 1 copy to actually go through. He pays 2 to cast a Cabal Ritual for 2 more draw triggers from Rhystic and Remora. Dang it, if they were the ones editing, maybe they would simply let some stuff resolve. Without threshold needed, he achieves the 7 mana for the spell everyone loves and hates to see resolve, Cyclonic Rift. Rhystic and Remora trigger, and he can't pay. Rodrigo then cracks his treasures to float some mana, and Elder uses his Arbor Elf to help cast a Chain of Vapor on David's Fellwar Stone, hoping to help out balancing the board after this reset. Worldly Tutor finally resolves, and Elder searches for a Manowar to the top, which he draws from the Remora trigger, and then Bal still exiles a Simian Spirit Guide, just in case the wheel finally resolves. What a crazy twist of events. Everyone draws 7 and Rodrigo sighs of relief as he finally gets to play during his own turn. He plays his Scrubland and casts a Sol Ring, followed by a Lotus Petal, and then casts an Entomb. He holds priority and fires a Dual Caster Mage. He wants to Entomb Breach and Sphinx, however, David responds with a free Mental Misstep, so Dual Caster enters play pretty sad without anything to copy. Rodrigo recasts his Commander Extus and then cracks the Petal to cast a Culling the Weak, cracking the Mage as well. Extus triggers and he returns Grim Hireling from the graveyard back to his hand. With the last floating mana, he casts the Fire Covenant from exile, paying 4 life to kill David's commanders. Extus triggers and he returns Dragon's Rage Channeler to his hand. Well viewers, welcome to game 2. Elder plays a Reflecting Pool and casts a Spellseeker. He searches for a Noxus Revival and passes, hoping to retrieve his combo pieces. Bal gets to his turn, and after the major reset, he plays a Mountain and dunks a Blood Moon into play, mostly expecting Elder would Noxus his Chain of Vapor to the top to deal with it, but instead, he targets Food Chain to the top. The table is now apprehensive to see if this moon will eventually lead the way for Elder to win. We're back to David's turn, who simply casts a Sol Ring and passes. Rodrigo plays a Luxury Mountain and casts his Dragon Rage Channeler just before attacking Bal for 4 and passing. Elder did have the basic, but it's an island. He attacks Bal for 1 and passes. In the end step still, Bal fires an Abrade on the David Sol Ring, to lower the possibilities of him achieving Metalcraft and bring out Malcolm again. Bal plays yet another mountain and casts a Robber of the Reach, attacking David, who has more than his 4 cards in hand, hoping to hit some tutors, but he finds a Mirror Mountain, so he just passes. David simply draws and passes. Rodrigo draws, plays a Flooded Mountain and goes into combat, this time dividing 4 commander damage to David and 3 in the air to Bal before passing. Elder finally finds a green card to pitch to his Chrome Mox, an Autumn's Veil, so this way he's able to cast his Food Chain. Everyone is complaining at Bal for that Blood Moon as the Food Chain resolves. Elder exiles Spellseeker for green mana to cast Eternal Witness, which enters and targets Manowar to be returned to his hand. He then exiles Eternal Witness for blue mana and recasts his commander Volo, which accompanied with Manowar means he could bounce all creatures on the board, but he would rather pass the turn safely. In the end step though, Bal casts a Chaos Warp on the Food Chain, which shuffles it into Elder's library and reveals an Otawara Mountain into play. We're back to Bal. He goes straight into combat hoping to find tutors from David's library, but he only finds mountains. He then recasts Squee from the graveyard and passes. David is still in the draw, play Mountain Go plan. Rodrigo once again goes straight into combat, sending Extus towards Elder this time and Darcy towards Bal, ending his turn. Elder draws, plays a Tarnished Mountain and passes. Hang in there viewers, the stalemate won't last long. Bal goes into combat again and attacks with Robber at David, exiling a blue March. He then plays a Blast Zone, which is a mountain, perhaps the only time it will enter with no counters on it. We're back to David. He draws and is incapable of casting anything, so he goes to clean up, discarding a Necropotence. Rodrigo at least has something to do, turning his creatures sideways, 3 damage to Bal and 4 to Elder, ending his turn. In the end step still, Elder casts his own overloaded Cyclonic Rift. He then gets to his turn, exiles an Elvish Spirit Guide, plays a Gaia's Cradle and casts a Windfall. There we go again, rifting into a will. David ponders for a second and casts a Vampiric Tutor in response. and in response to that, Bal flashes in a Dualcaster Mage, entering and targeting the tutor to be copied. However, in response to it, Rodrigo hardcasts a Deflecting Sword, changing the target of Dualcaster Mage to Windfall, as he is hoping to find Breach as a backup plan since he is now discarding Sevin's and World Gorger Dragon to the Windfall. Note that Animate Dead is already in his graveyard, so he has everything to try to go for it next turn. Everyone draws 7 and then David searches for a Mnemonic Betrayal to the top, as graveyards are about to become pretty much filled. Now, still in response to the original will, Eller flashes in an Endurance. Volo triggers, and in response to it, Rodrigo casts a Swords to Plowshares on Volo. He does know it won't matter, but since he's about to lose his hand and his graveyard will be shuffled, at least he gets the most out of his cards, and he can still shuffle with his Strand. In response though, Eller casts March of the Swirling Mists on his Volo, but now it's David who responds with a delay on the march, as he's going to lose it as well. Eller still has a Pact of Negation at hand though, casting it on the Swords. But Rodrigo still has a say in the matter, casting a Dark Ritual for 3 black mana, to then help him cast March of Otherworldly Light, exiling a Grand Abolishir as well, and targeting Volo with it. Volo finally leaves play and that stack clears up until those Endurances about to enter play. The copied Endurance triggers and targets Rodrigo's graveyard, and then the original Endurance triggers and targets Elder's own graveyard, as he hopes to retrieve some combo pieces from it. With the stack cleared the whole way down to Windfall, Balnal responds with a Wild Magic Surge, targeting David's Underground Sea, so this way he can get rid of David's Vampiric Tutor as well as giving him a third land in hopes he has mana for whatever comes after the will from Elder's side. Rodrigo responds to it by cracking his Flooded Strand and finds a Plateau. David lets Wild Magic Surge resolve as those 2 Endurances just spoil David's plans. He gets a Polluted Delta and just cracks it right away, in order to shuffle everything again before Windfall finally resolves, and everyone draws 6 new cards this time. Elder still found what he calls his alternative wincon, Mana Gorger Hydra. Bal plays a mountain and starts thinking if he still has any way out of this, as he casts Imperial Recruiter, triggering Hydra for a counter. He finds a Goblin Warchief and casts it right away, for another counter to the Hydra. He momentarily forgets George has Trample as he casts Scree from his graveyard, giving it another counter and then passes. David plays an island and casts a Ponder. George gains a counter and then David passes. In his end step, Rodrigo casts a Vampiric Tutor. George gets bigger and Rodrigo searches for an Entomb. He then gets to his turn, draws and casts Entomb. Hydra gets one more counter and he finds a World Gorger Dragon into his graveyard. He now casts a Gamble and the Hydra has another head now. He searches for Animate Dead and randomly discards a Spectator Sitting. He proceeds to cast the Animate Dead. George grows and the enchantment resolves, entering and returning World Gorger to play, triggering to exile all his other permanents, and Rodrigo floats 1 mana of each color. In response, however, David channels an Otawara Soaring City on the World Gorger Dragon. In response though, Rodrigo casts a Cabal Ritual for 5 black mana. Hydra gets 1 more counter and then Rodrigo casts a Desperate Ad Nauseam. He has few options and eventually does find the Deflecting Sword, but is 2 mana short from hardcasting it. This way, World Gorger is bounced and triggering its Leave the Battlefield trigger, to return all exiled cards with him to play, but there were none exiled yet, as its ETB trigger was still on the stack. This way, everything is exiled for good. He still plays a Command Tower, and uses the last floating mana to cast Archivist of Ogma, triggering the Hydra and proceeding to his cleanup step. Elder untaps and pays for his Pact trigger. He casts a Codex Shredder, feeding his Hydra, and follows it with a Sage's Road Denizen, which is one of his outlets. George is now a 14-14 and is swung towards David, while both Endurances are added towards Rodrigo. 2 players on 1 swoop. Elder now plays a Forest and passes. Bal is dead in 2 Hydra attacks and desperately needs to find Underworld Breach if he wants to win. He plays a Mikokoro and totally forgets about his Blast Zone, so he continues to aim towards his game-ending combo, casting a Genesis Chamber, growing Hydra and following that with a Skyfire Phoenix, triggering the Hydra and then the Chamber for a mirror upon entering play. He still casts a Skirk Prospector, triggering the Hydra, just in case Eller retrieves his Gilded Drake with a Codex Shredder. He creates another mirror and passes. In the end step still, Eller activates the Shredder on himself, milling a Polluted Delta. He goes to his turn, plays a Misty Rainforest and attacks Bal for 17 damage. Bal has 13 damage on board, not enough to block the Hydra successfully. Elder passes and on his end step, Bal activates Mikokoro for each player to draw a card. He draws a possible out, a Direfleet Daredevil, which he casts, growing the Hydra and then entering, triggering and targeting Elder's Windfall. In response though, Elder cracks his Codex Shredder to return the Windfall to his hand. But still in response to that, Bal casts a Deflecting Sword to change the target of the Shredder to a land. Hydra gets another counter and it's basically do or die at this point. He creates a mirror and does cast the Windfall, only now realizing Blast Zone was a way out. With 5 cards in hand, Eller wants to deny as much draws as he can to Baal, so he cracks his Emergence Zone and then casts a Glimpse of Nature. He then flashes in Toski, Bearer of Secrets, drawing a card and said it is the food chain he was digging for. He also creates a mirror token and now Windfall resolves and both players draw 4 cards. Baal finds nothing, so he activates Mikokoro as last resort, but Underworld Breach is nowhere to be found, so he scoops to that huge Hydra. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. Rhystic Study played a major role in denying early storming turns from Baal, and eventually 2 Cyclonic Rifts prior to Wheel of Fortune and Windfall reset this game twice. Clérigo showed how Marduk can keep pushing winning attempts, but Otawara revealed once again how it's such a game breaker. Eventually, Menagorger Hydra won the game after most interaction was used. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, TJ Rapp, Mike Purr, Aajimo, Drunken House Cat, V, RJ, Heated Chill, Pina, Ricardo, Dragon Steak, Katarina, Michael Bowen, Super Scaldi, Dog, Wyatt, Wicked and Zenon, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.